My name is Jenny Lynch, and we are excited to get started with this presentation. I am joined by Daniel and Dale, but I will get into the introductions in just about a minute. I'd like to go over a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. The webinar is being recorded, and it will be about a 45-minute, 50-minute session. We'll leave about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. The slides and the webinar recording will be available after the session. We'll email that later on this afternoon to everybody. Please send in your questions. There is a pane in the GoToWebinar at the bottom right-hand side. If you click on that, you can send your your questions to us, and we can get those answered. And we will answer the questions more than likely live at the end of the presentation, unless we feel that we can squeeze them in during this cram-packed session of good information. And we're going to be sending out a survey after the webinar, and please provide your feedback. We always look to make sure that we're providing the content and information people are looking for. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and introduce these speakers today. That would be Daniel Cohen-Dumani. He is the CEO and founder of Portal Solutions. Could you say hello to everyone?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be on the call this afternoon.
Thank you. And backed up is Dale Tuttle. He's the right-hand man here at Portal Solutions. He's our COO. Could you say hello to the audience?
Hi, everybody. And yes, it is true. I need a new picture. Someone needs to get on that right away. I'll just take a selfie.
That's all right. All right, great. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to be going over a few things, and really, we're going to be talking about employee engagement. What it is, how important it is, how technology plays a part in employee engagement. We're going to talk about the roadblocks standing in the way. We're really going to focus on the power of Office 365 and really how much it really does hold in harnessing employee engagement. And we're going to talk about OneWindow Workplace and how it can make Office 365 better and help drive employee engagement. So Daniel, why don't you go ahead and kick it off with what is employee engagement?
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny, and good afternoon, everyone. So we have a very interesting topic today, and as you may expect, we are going to talk about what employee engagement is. And let's start with the obvious. What is employee engagement? This is a topic that has been taught quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 years, and a lot of organizations are starting to recognize the importance of having a workforce that's engaged. So employee engagement starts with happiness. Employee can be happy, they can be motivated, or they can be engaged. The study have really told us that an optimal employee meets all the three. They're happy, they're motivated, and they're highly engaged. So what is happiness? Happiness is about satisfaction. Are employees happy at work? Motivation relates to their expectations. Are they getting what they expect in return for their efforts? Employee engagement, however, is quite different. Unlike happiness or motivation, engaged employees understand what it takes for the company to be successful. They want to be involved with the organization's success, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to help the business get there. Dale, do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, when you put all those three things together, it really helps the organization accomplish their mission. And so there's been a lot of studies on how to do this and what an engaged employee looks like, and a lot of it is common sense. But really, we're looking towards what are the benefits, what are the outcomes of an engaged employee. I know from the perspective of our business, which is IT professional services, we need engaged employees just to deal with the cadence of our business. I mean, things happen. They happen quickly. They happen after hours. And we need employees to be engaged in believing in the firm and engaged with the firm for them to deal with just that cadence of the business that we find ourselves in. And you can say that for any business. We're not alone in having to deal with customers, with products, right? And you need engaged employees, happy and motivated employees to really conduct your business.
Right, and it's interesting. There was a study that was made late last year in 2015 that where 78% of today's U.S.-based business leaders have rated the engagement and retention as one of their top concerns. So
yeah,
and see that. Yep. That's coming to to be important too. So let's start with the poll here. We would love to get the audience thoughts about engagement. You're all working for an organization, and do you feel the organization effectively engage with its employees today? So let's give it a few minutes, and we're going to use that to compare this with studies that have been made, and that's really the topic of the next slide, is to talk about employee engagement in numbers. So we've got about 70% of the people voted, and that's very interesting. About 22% say yes, 72% say no, and a few say they don't know. So 26-ish, 30%. So let's look at what's out there and what study has been made. As some of you may know, there's an organization called the Gallup Research organization, and they did a research in 2013. So it's about a few years old, and they've been tracking this topic for a long time. Gallup, among other things, do a lot of work around employee satisfaction, engagement. And here's what they found. Since 2000, for about 16 years that they've been tracking this, the number really hasn't changed much. About 70% of the people say they're not engaged. And interesting, it sort of matched what we polled our audience today. And if we look over the last few years, and it'll be interesting to know that Gallup actually had a tracking poll, a monthly tracking poll of employee engagement. And the numbers really have not changed even for the last 5 years. I mean, we're seeing an uptick in March, where we passed 34%, and that's been the highest it's ever been measured. But overall, those numbers have not evolved too much. Other things that Gallup has done in their study, and they looked at what factors influence engagement. One of them that's interesting is flexible time or remote or ability to telework has a very positive aspect to employee engagement, and it's sort of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, it is. We've heard a lot of lately, I think, up until recently, about how hard it was to keep your virtual employees engaged. And now there's data showing us that those are your more engaged employees. And I do think technology plays a big role in this.
It does.
But this is really important, especially for those of us in large metropolitan areas. It's just hard getting to work now, right? In fact, here at Portal Solutions, we have flex time, right? We let folks work from home or remotely, I guess I should say.
At different times.
At different times. And so we've had to use IT to keep our own employees engaged. And that's really what we're talking about today. But I think this is a fascinating little metric here, because now we're finding that your remote employees are now your most engaged. That's just the opposite from what you probably would have heard 5 years ago.
Right. And yes, so flexibility tends to drive engagement. And when I read the study, I was sort of surprised of these results. Here's another one that's probably people will not contest, is the fact that engagement level change based on generational. And we've all been talking about the millennial generation, this young workforce that's coming in. Which, by the way, is going to represent about 50% of the U.S.-based workforce in 2020. And guess what? They're the least engaged of all the generations, right? About 28%, coming down from 44%. So that's also a very interesting fact here.
A little counterintuitive, actually, right? Because I think technology plays a role, and these are probably the most connected, technology-connected people. So you would think that they'd be a little bit more engaged.
So part of the large topic of this Gallup study from 2013 has been about, what are the benefits, what are the results of high engagement? And we tried to distill that. I mean, it was a 100-page study. But, overall, there are a lot of benefits. And Dale, do you want to speak to us about those?
Yeah, and I mentioned a little bit, I kind of tipped my hat earlier, where it really is true, though. The studies see this, and I'm sure folks on the line probably have similar experiences. When people are actively engaged, you actually get better results. And better results are really financial results, right? Everyone's trying to look or is looking to improve their bottom line, but engaged employees are the ones that help drive a better bottom line. So performance generally is better with engaged employees. And then when you start combining this with kind of what's happening in the workforce, we have more virtual employees, right? Remote employees. We have younger people, right? So we have to bring all three of these things together to make sure that we have engaged employees who are participating and helping the performance of the firm.
Right, and the study also talked about the fact that engagement tends to have a greater impact on the performance than other things such as policies or perks, right, rewards. So it clearly has, brings a lot to the table, and every organization should think about how to drive better engagement.
Yeah, I think that's we're not doing it for altruistic reasons. I think companies are trying to drive engagement to improve business performance.
It is, and again, Gallup said, measuring the company that had the best engagement, there was a direct result on better performance.
Yep.
A correlation between them. So what are the trends in employee engagement? We're going to drill down in each of those. Obviously, engagement remains a top concern with many organizations. One thing that can drive better performance is onboarding. We're going to drill down into that. Peer-to-peer recognition will continue to grow. Millennials will dominate the workplace culture. We've said earlier that they will represent about 50% of the workforce in about 4 years. And they will drive a push for greater transparency and a demand for a process that becomes two ways, right, where feedback becomes not just one way, but two ways. So let's drill down into those specific items. Number one, engagement remains a top concern. And this is backed by not only the Gallup study, but a company called Tiny Pulse, which is really engaged into that topic. Do a lot of survey run, and they predict that employee engagement will remain the number one concern. And not only do 80% of organizations polled believe culture and engagement to be some of their top challenges, 50% of those companies that were polled believe the problem is very important, right?
Yeah.
So it is something that organizations are paying attention to.
It's an enduring concern, if you will, throughout organizations. And I have to say, I love the name Tiny Pulse. I mean, that was a brilliant choice of names, by the way. But the research that's coming out, though, is just showing that this is not going to go away. Right?
It's not. So number two, onboarding will need to evolve. So for those of you that don't know in the audience today, onboarding is how do you bring a new employee into the organization and get them to embrace the culture quickly so that they will become a more active, future-oriented individual that allow them to strive, hit the ground running with a plan quickly. And it's clearly a tremendous amount of opportunities to optimize this process, specifically from a technology standpoint.
Right, and I think that's certainly in our own experience with the experience of our customers, pardon me, is this is when you can set the cultural expectations for your firm. And again, technology is a great way to help enable that cultural adaptation.
Right, and I think, again, we'll talk about how technology plays a role, but clearly, having, as a new employee, if you could come in and quickly discover and have access to anything you need to find people in the organization, to discover what's important, and to really have a place to follow a process as you get engaged with this new organization makes a tremendous amount of good sense.
I think you'll see as we go forward, there's a lot of feedback mechanism into these separate categories, right? They tend to reinforce one another.
Definitely. The next topic is about peer-to-peer recognition, and that will continue to grow. So what is peer-to-peer recognition? In the workplace, traditionally, there was recognition. We all know that has validation factor. It makes sense. But instead of being a top-bottom, only your manager will recognize, we're now seeing this millennial generation driving peer-to-peer recognition.
Yeah, and I think there's an expectation now from an HR perspective that employees essentially want to participate in that, not only, evaluation and also the feedback of each other's performance.
Yeah, and it said that this has really evolved over the past couple of years, and it said that in 2016, this will become the dominant form of employee recognition and appreciation. So not only the manager will recognize the employee, anyone, as a matter of fact, direct report, peers, colleagues will want to be able to do that. And frankly, technology will play a big role for that too.
No doubt.
All right, next topic, millennials will dominate the workplace culture. Well, we know that, right? And if you guys haven't dealt with millennials, it's going to happen sooner than you think.
Wait, are we millennials? What does that mean?
We're not. This is the generation after us. They are. However, it's forecasted that millennials will become the largest generation in the workforce soon, in the next few years. And they will really drive and exert a majority influence on the company culture, right? So company culture will change due to this change in the workforce. The workflow's value will shift, right, towards what millennials expect. And collaboration and social responsibility in work life will be impacted because of that.
I think, the next two things that are on there really flow from having more millennials. As you'll see, the next one is there's going to be a greater push for transparency.
Absolutely.
That is part of the culture. You see this in every aspect of business life, but also political life, how public sector operates. There's an expectation that the government, for instance, will be more open with its people, that businesses will be more open with not only their own employees, but with their customers as well.
So what are the characteristics, Dale, of millennials, right? They've grown up with information being instantly accessible.
Yeah.
What else do they like?
Well, I think that the openness and transparency, that cultural of open information exchange is an expectation when people, certainly when the people we hire, when they come into the organization, they don't expect that hierarchy of knowledge protection, if you will, at the top. So at Portal Solutions, we're very open with our employees, and when they come in the door, they realize that Daniel and I are not holding on to information that they can't see. We actually literally share everything with our employees. And I think there's an expectation, especially of the younger people joining the firm, that we will do that. So it's not a surprise to them.
So transparency is not just at the staff level, within the team, within colleagues, it's within the entire organization, right? So, this millennial like constant and continuous feedback.
Yep.
You need a way and a process and obviously technology to allow this constant feedback. And hopefully that's not email, right? It's not email based. There's something else that can come to play.
Right. So I think actually on the next slide we have that feedback processes will become two-way. People expect to be able to provide feedback and then receive feedback, and they do this, or they expect this, if you will, from both the IT enablement that you provide to them, but also in their interaction with their social interactions with employees.
Right. So this feedback is truly becoming two ways, right? So we see a need to collaborate between the leadership of the organization, drive personal accountability, and this feedback process becomes two-way, right? Not only the manager is providing feedback to the staff, but the staff is providing feedback the other way. That's really driven by more transparency.
And I think we're getting away from that traditional performance review type of culture. Certainly that's still part of it, right? Because people want to get those formal checkpoints, if you will, but it's becoming much more than just that. Once or twice a year you get a formal checkpoint with somebody.
Excellent. All right, so how do we drive a great culture of engagement? I don't think technology is the only way to do that, right?
Right.
So what do we do? I think number one, and that's an important topic, is to inspire trust and confidence in the senior leadership, right? People can't be engaged if they don't trust their leaders. That's number one, and that's pretty obvious, right? Number two, as leaders, we need to help employees understand the big picture. What is the big picture?
Right, and that comes with the openness thing we were talking about a minute ago. So a lot of our customers, we know for a fact, share their strategic plan for the year, and they do it by quarter. We do that here at Portal Solutions. We lay out our plan by each quarter so everybody knows how they fit into that process.
And we use technology to make this available to everyone, of course. So that's important, right? So, organization needs the place to communicate the value, the vision, and to keep that fresh and updated and constantly available.
Right.
So we talk about onboarding for new employees. Of course, research has shown that an employee first day on the job is a key factor in determining their future level of engagement, right? So day one is critical, but then everything that comes after that, is something that will address future performance and of course, engagement of this new employee into your organization. And, it's been shown that some organizations can be extremely effective. There's companies that are hiring new employees, in massive amount every week, right? And they have system and processes and a lot of technology behind the scenes to make this, a true success, right?
In fact, number 4 is a big part of that. It flows from that is when your new employees come in, coaching. You need to, and it gets back into the feedback mechanisms and the frequency and all that sort of good stuff. But continuous coaching of people, especially your younger folks coming in, maybe it's their first job, right? That's an important role that you're going to play. If this is someone's first job out of school, that they have a positive experience, and it will influence their performance and their expectations and how they believe firms are going to operate into the future. So you owe it to them to provide good coaching.
Good point. Of course, you need to have careers conversation, right? So those conversations need to continue. Employee needs to feel like they're being coached and that they have conversation around their careers as well.
In decision making, you talked about that one. You're just reinforcing that. And again, you've heard me say this a lot already. Now I sound like a broken record, but it flows from transparency, the openness of the firm, right? That's how you need to share decision making,
and make it available and communicate about it.
Right, not just once.
Technology is a great tool, to help doing that.
And maintaining a focus on retention. Again, if you engage with your employees, you have a higher likelihood of them sticking around, right? It's cheaper to keep your people than to find new ones. So, pretty much every firm wants to keep their best people, and engaging with employees is the best way to do that.
That's right. Of course, you also need to make good hiring decisions. That's obvious. And lastly, really driven by this millennial generation is this concept of constant praise. We had an example where, we see it here internally that those younger folks, millennial generation, wants to be praised not once a month, constantly, right? And rewarded for high performance. So we try to highlight here, of course, some of those topics and needs are driven by culture, by processes, by governance, but technology plays a role, right? And technology plays a role in many of those aspects of how you create a culture of engagement. Again, technology isn't everything, but it helps enable.
Right. If you have a bad culture, technology is not going to save you. But if you have great policies, you have that culture of openness, technology can be the enabler of great culture, right, and help you engage and retain your employees.
Excellent. All right, so let's shift now gear, and let's talk a little bit about the tools that we've been talking about, Office 365 and additional tool here. How can those help, right? Because obviously some of you on the call have maybe some interest in, okay, well, we get the idea of this culture of engagement. It's important. How do we do it? And let's start about Office 365 because, a lot of prospective clients come to us and have this preconceived notion that we're just going to put, a tool out there and this will drive engagement.
And I think also what we're seeing, Daniel, with our customers on Office 365, a lot of them are folks that were SharePoint on-prem SharePoint. So then as they've migrated over to Office 365, they're on SharePoint Online. But the beauty of Office 365 are the other services that help you engage with your employees, not just SharePoint. right?
So what does Office 365 help? I think number one, we talked earlier about this concept that a flexible and remote workforce is more engaged. Well, guess what? Office 365 is a tool that enables this remote workforce where people can work remotely. That's obvious. The second one is obviously this is a platform that unifies collaboration and communication, which we know are key topics for some of that feedback, some of the feeling of staying motivated and engaged. Obviously, Office 365 supports this two-way feedback. And again, don't think email as a way to provide feedback. This is the historical way. There's better ways to do that with social enterprise network and other capabilities here to support two-way feedback. And obviously, when it's well implemented, well designed, well governed, Office 365 will help you increase that transparency, right? Because now leadership, manager, everyone has a platform to talk about what's going on and be very, very transparent.
And I think also, if I'll just focus a little bit more and tie some back to what we were saying earlier, more and more of our people, your people on the phone, I'm sure, are working remotely. So you need a platform, a cloud-based platform that's going to enable engagement, right? That's really what we're talking about with Office 365.
All right, but I think, Dale, there's a little bit of a problem here, right? It's not the magic pill that people would expect.
Right. In Office 365, I think one of the most common criticisms, if you will, about the platform is there's a lot to it. Right? Office 365 has a lot of different capabilities. Microsoft, to me, confusingly calls these things workloads. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
I call them capabilities. But they can take time to deploy. And the user experience across these capabilities is disjointed. There's really not a single pane of glass that you can look at, SharePoint, Yammer, Delve, Planner, Video, all these capabilities that come with Office 365, they are, for the most part, standalone applications that are under the umbrella of Office 365. You need to sort out those technologies, pardon me, and how to engage with your employees with those capabilities.
Excellent. So let's drill down and see how technology can help increase employee engagement. So we're going to go in a few examples here. Those are taken from both Office 365 as well as our utility solution, OneWindow Workplace. So number one, how do you foster recognition, right? That's a feature that's been out there in Yammer for a while. Newly in Office 365 is, you need a tool to help communicate and praise colleagues. So we've talked about this peer-to-peer recognition, top, bottom. Don't send an email out and say, great job, John. No, just praise it here. This is being searchable, discoverable, and make it available. So use modern tools, social enterprise network of such to drive the recognition and to praise people.
Yeah, and I think in Office 365, Yammer is the primary way you do that.
That's right. So number two here is how do you enable peer-to-peer conversation, right? And what we mean by that is, in the world of technology, people should be able to like something, comment on content, share, right? Find something you like and share it with your coworkers. That's really how, that really drives engagement. People find something when they share. They find something interesting, they're engaged, right? They really would like their colleague to know about this. We're seeing that again a lot with the millennial generation where they will start commenting. So your platform should allow to comment on things. So if we're seeing on the screen here on the right-hand side, you have an article that's been published and people have made comments here, right? Or on the left-hand side, you can share something easily. One click of a button, I just find something I like, I'm going to share it with other people. So that truly enables peer-to-peer conversation. So coming next is how do you empower a remote workforce, right? And that's really done several ways. One is, they need this true enabling platform. We've talked about Office 365. You need people, by this day and age, everyone can get their email anywhere, but it hasn't been true for other type of content. files, personal files, publishing news and things like that. So you need to empower your remote workforce not just to email, but to do more than that, right? Access and contribute to your workforce, to their work from any device. So we're showing you here an example of our OneWindow workplace solution from a phone, from a tablet, and you need to make sure that what you become the platform, your social intranet, your social enterprise network, that they're accessible anywhere. Because believe it or not, those people want to be engaged whenever they feel like getting engaged, right? Not when they walk in the office from 8 to 5.
And even when you're remote, while you may have your laptop there, it might be at some point you have your iPad with you, right? Or maybe you're on your phone. If you're on your way to a business meeting, right? That counts as being remote from the office. And you want that experience to be effective on any of those devices. So as we move to more remote workers, and we need to be able to support across so many different devices. That's really critical. So the mobile and responsive design is huge, and just the ability to support, and very quickly, right? I mean, for instance, later today we'll go out and meet with some customers, and instead of being on our iPads or our laptops, we're going to switch over to our iPhones, right? And so the solution really needs to be nimble like that and be able to handle that transition quickly.
Very good. All right, so how do you continue to help employee engagement? One, you need to make collaboration easy, right? For many organizations, collaborating on content isn't that easy. So we have an example here of an intranet that has a lot of different components, right? Actually, in the human resources workspace here, and we've been able to light up the social platform that really encourage sharing, communicating with contextual collaboration. Right, so that's critical. You need collaboration to be contextual and to be embedded, right? Don't expect people to go in their Yammer feed to post something, then go back to their SharePoint site to find a document. All of those things need to be contextually connected. And integrated. And integrated, of course. People like to discover, if you want to be transparent in the organization, you need to enable discovery, right? And discovery is in search. It's finding things, letting the system suggest piece of content to me, right? So I'm here in this human resources workspace, and the system is saying, this is what's trending, this is what people are showing, around you when they visit this workspace. So discovery is becoming more and more important.
Right, and that's, again, one of the beauties of the underlying platform of Office 365. Delve is under the covers there, watching, tracking what's trending.
And learning behind the scenes.
It's learning what you're clicking on, so it makes very good suggestions on what might be relevant to you. And what you can do, and what we've done with our OneWindow platform, is we've assembled all these capabilities into, OneWindow, where you get all these capabilities working for you in an integrated fashion.
That's right. And last item here in making the collaboration easy is allowing people to stay in the now, right? To get in the know of what's going on. So here, in the example here in the screenshot on the right-hand side is get people to learn and see what's happening. To be engaged, you need to know, right? But only you need to know the system should be smart enough to remove the noise, right? There may be 100 news items published on that workspace, but only 3 or 4 applies to me, right? And it would be great if the system would be smart enough to recognize who you are and present to you the news that makes sense based on what you're interested in, or your position, your role, your location, and so forth, right? We all, as a worker, we all buried under a huge amount of content and information. It's really hard for people to get around and find what's going on. And lastly, people like, and from a technology standpoint, like to be able to personalize their experience, right? So here is an example of a personalization screen that we put in place in our OneWindow solution, which allows people, when they onboard on the solution, to select what they're interested in, put topics, through channels, through maybe location, industry, and of course, the organization can pre-subscribe people based on where they are. But at the end of the day, people can come here and select what they're interested in. So personalization is becoming a key element, and that truly drives engagement because now people will see what they're interested in, minus the noise. And lastly, we have, this concept again of discovery, and it's driving people not to search but to discover content, which is a fundamental change that we're seeing. The best technology we have is, LinkedIn or Facebook, right? Most people don't search. They actually go on the feed and discover content, right? When the system is smart enough to behind the scenes suggest things that you may be interested. I think LinkedIn is doing a great job doing that lately, where your feed is becoming a lot smarter. They're suggesting, based on the people you interacted with, what could be interesting to you, and use those algorithms to help you navigate through huge amount of content.
And that's where I think we really need technology to engage with employees, right? There's so much stuff out there that you need the underlying platform to be doing the work for you, right? Everyone has a lot of demands on their time, and the last thing we need people doing is searching and hunting and browsing for information when the platform can bring it to you.
Very true, very true. All right, so in conclusion here, the purpose of the topic today was to talk about employee engagement. And what we've learned today is, in most organizations, more than 70% of more than 30% are engaged, 70% are not engaged. We've learned that high engagement drives better organizational performance. And we've talked about how do we get there, and really starting with this need to drive a culture of engagement, and that technology can be the catalyst for increased engagement. But bottom line, Dale, and you will agree with that technology alone will not increase engagement.
No, it won't save you, so to speak, but if you have those policies of openness and the culture of openness, technology will help you achieve those goals. If you don't really have that culture, technology won't come in and save the day by any means.
Very good. All right, so I believe, Jenny, we have a few questions here.
Yes, we do have a few questions. Specifically, I know we talked about employee engagement and what it means, but we also talked about like the intranet, like what you want to have, what you want to focus on. Someone's asking, okay, so you launched that and you have it. How do you make sure employee engagement lasts the kind of the duration? You know how sometimes people are excited about a new product. How do you ensure that still engages the employee?
Yeah, that's a really good question here. So, how do you sustain engagement? How can technology help sustain engagement? And that's where I think the culture of the organization, this culture of engagement and the commitment to the organization to keep that is critical, right? Again, the technology itself will just be that catalyst, that facilitator of engagement, but you need a culture behind the scene that promote, foster, and recognize engagement without a threat, right?
And that comes from the onboarding process, right?
Start with
here are the tools. Here are the tools. This is how we do it. And if they see other people doing it, they'll do it themselves.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, with Office 365, this person has Office 365 and they're in the process of rolling it out. Where should they even begin to make sure that their employees at least embrace the new technology? Because it's a big change for them. They don't currently have an intranet in place.
I think it begins with understanding what the engagement opportunities are with Office 365. We've talked about, using the tool name, but Yammer, right? So you have that social features where you can chat, you can like, you can comment on things. Then, of course, you have just the other pieces of it. I mean, document sharing and retention. Okay, that'd be the SharePoint side of things. But really, I think that the key to answer that question, though, is what is the culture of the organization? Is it already open and sharing? Do you have a lot of people who are like really into, SharePoint? Is SharePoint a part of the culture already? If not, you might be able to use more of a rolled up type of intranet as a service like OneWindow. There's a culture of SharePoint and heavy customization and that sort of stuff. That's probably the way to implement Office 365, if you will. But if you need kind of a solution that really helps everyone fit it all together for them, OneWindow which sits on top of Office 365 might be a better alternative.
Okay, great, thanks. There's another question. Is there any distinction between commercial interests and nonprofit government organizations?
Well, fundamentally, no, right? I mean, engagement is engagement. It's what you're engaging them with. But we actually have a lot of not-for-profits and associations that are our customers. And I don't really, Dan, you can disagree, I guess, but I don't find a lot of difference fundamentally in what you're trying to achieve, right? You're trying to achieve collaboration, trying to engage with your staff, your customers maybe. I don't see a fundamental difference. The good news is that there's generally better pricing options for the not-for-profits and the associations, right, from the Office 365 platform. But I think it's the same basic goal, and the approach is the same.
And I think the time when organizations recognize may be different. I mean, clearly, in this case, commercial world has recognized that being a problem a long time ago, and they're being some organizations are being a lot more transparent, where the public sector may be lagging or maybe ahead. But clearly there may be distinction. But this is coming across the board, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I think engaging employees in the public sector may be more challenging because of maybe the pace of change. It's not as strong as in the commercial world. But this is a trend that's coming across the board, and we know it's really driven by the generational change that's happening in the world.
Right, and so there's you mentioned something about the public sector, which is really interesting. First of all, Office 365 adoption by public sector is growing quickly, but also millennials are starting to move into the government workforce now. So that's going to start driving the use of these technologies more and more. Not only Office 365, but the other cloud platforms. So I think public sector will come on very strongly with implementing Office 365, and the expectation of government workers will then become what it already is, I think, on the commercial side, right? More openness, more simultaneous feedback, peer-to-peer recognition, all the things we talked about earlier will become the norm in government very soon.
I think the government and the public sector has been leading in transparency outside with their constituents, and it's coming inside as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question is, they were expecting when they got Office 365, I think that everyone kind of thinks that they turn it on. I think we kind of addressed this at the beginning of the session, that you all of a sudden you deploy it and everything's ready to go. And they're realizing that's not the case. I know we talked about and touched on a little bit with the OneWindow intranet, but what else should they be evaluating to figure out where I know you mentioned culture before, and like, how do they get started with their Office 365 even plan?
Right. The first question that I would ask back to them is did you have SharePoint before or some other intranet tool? And what level of sophistication did you have? If you have a lot of heavy power users of your intranet, well, then you probably SharePoint Online feature of Office 365 is the way to go, right? But if you don't have a lot of sophistication, you're going to, something like OneWindow would be really beneficial because it takes care of, it rolls up all those different capabilities of Office 365, not all of them, a bunch of them, the ones that people use the most, and they rolls it up into one experience, okay? So again, you have to ask yourself, how sophisticated are we? And that's where people like Portal Solutions, we can come in and help you figure out what path do I go down. Because I'll agree with you 100%. When you click on the Office 365 icon, we call it the waffle, you get all these capabilities, and then you ask yourself, now what do I do?
Well, I think that's the problem in this this person who wrote in, I think that it's overwhelming, and they don't even know where to start. So it's almost like they're doing their old habits, even though they have this new powerful platform, and they just need to know, well, how do I communicate to the employees what they should be doing? And I guess that really ties into the governance.
It does. People like us can come in and help you make sense of those capabilities and what ones really translate into better employee engagement. Some of them may or may not help, right? But a lot of them do. And again, it'll depend on how you deploy those to your staff. It will depend on your current culture. But where do you want to be in terms of culture? Would you like to change the culture, right? And promote more engagement? We can help you figure out which one of those tools will give you a better chance of success.
That's right. And to the same point, Dale, when you think about a solution to drive engagement, many people will say this is my intranet or my digital workplace. It really starts with your vision, right? And your vision, including employee engagement, is one of the driving business objective or business factor. And we see a trend where many organizations start adding engagement as one of their key, visionary goal or business objective as driving a digital workplace or intranet solution.
Right. We have, and again, speaking back to those trends we talked about earlier, more and more people are working remotely. So we need to make sure we have the technology platforms to enable that remote experience.
And then someone else wrote in, how do you handle, I guess, the governance with remote workers versus those individuals who are coming into who are working in the organization?
Yeah, governance and adoption is a big part. I mean, we have a set of best practices for doing that. But, how you do it, again, I'm not throwing it completely back on the person that asked the question, but you have to launch from the culture that you have, right? So understanding that culture and then coming to a set of best practices based on that culture, that's how we do it. That's how, when we go into a firm, that's how we do things. So there is a little bit of self-awareness, if you will, that needs to take place as you figure out how to engage with those remote employees. But certainly Office 365 and absolutely OneWindow, those are tools that help engage those remote workers that really make them as effective as possible.
Right, and someone has a question, what's the difference between like an intranet like the OneWindow you've mentioned versus building something on Office 365, like just using SharePoint Online?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that what we've seen is again, employee engagement is a key concern of yours, and time is the essence. We're now seeing a demand for more turnkey solution, right? People can't wait 6-9 months to get to this. They want it, right? And that's really the difference between going a traditional route of Office 365 or taking a turnkey product such as OneWindow. There's plenty more in the marketplace, but such as OneWindow that's lining up and turning Office 365 into a great solution day one.
Right, it's faster. And also it alleviates a lot of the training, right? Because it's intuitive, people understand how it works, roll out, and it leverages the pieces of Office 365 you're likely going to roll out to them anyway. But we do it almost immediately.
So it all depends on the business objective,
yeah.
Right? I mean, we see organization, and often it could be a hybrid, where we've got some part of the solution that's turnkey, some that's more custom. We're seeing more and more of organization moving to this more hybrid deployment model.
Okay, great. All right, I think those are all the questions today.
Good questions.
Yeah, there were a lot of them too. Yeah. Okay, the next steps. I know we touched on the turnkey intranet, and that's really taking Office 365 to a new level where you can get rapid ROI and adoption from it. And you might want to see if a turnkey intranet is right for your organization. If you're interested, please, I know you can't click right now, but when we send you this deck, if you're interested, please reach out to us. We'd love to share a little bit more information about it and see if it is a right fit. And in the meantime, we do have a blog just talking about intranet trends in general. We'd love to have you visit it. But I think that's all we have today. Thank you so much for listening. Dale, Daniel, thank you for your time.
Of course, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all for participating.
We'll see everybody next month. Have a great afternoon.